Votes and proceedings. Page 925. Page 926. Page 927. Page 928. Page 929. Senator Lola Ashuru.
Mr. President, I'm Senator Lola Ashuru, representing the good people of Kwara State. I move for the adoption of votes and proceedings of Wednesday, 12 February 2022. I so move.
Distinguished Senator Michael Nati.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. I rise to support that, to second that the votes and proceedings of 12th February be approved as moved by my colleague, Ade.
Thank you. Distinguished colleagues, those in support of the motion that the votes and proceedings of Wednesday, 12th February 2020 be approved, say aye. Those against, say nay. The ayes have it. The votes and proceedings of Wednesday, 12th February 2020 is hereby approved. I wish to acknowledge the presence of staff and students of Lingua High School, Karu Local Government, Nasarawa State, who are in the gallery to observe our proceedings today. You are welcome. I wish you a very fruitful observation. You may sit down, please. I wish to also acknowledge the presence of staff and students of Maraken International School, Karu, local government area, Nasarawa State, who are in the gallery to observe Senate proceedings. You are welcome. I wish you a very fruitful observation of the Senate proceedings today. You may sit down, please. Last but not the least, I also wish to acknowledge the presence of staff and students of Noble Guide Academy, Kubwa, Abuja, who are also in the gallery to observe Senate proceedings. You are welcome. I wish you a very fruitful observation of our proceedings today. You may sit down, please. Petitions? No petitions. Leader of the Senate. Point of order, Senator Kashim Shettima.
Your Excellency, distinguished colleagues, we are facing real existential threats in the northeast sub-region, and I crave your indulgence to refer to Standing Orders 42 and 52, and I seek your permission to read.
You may read.
If possible, be referred to the President of the Senate before commencement of the day's sitting, and the President of the Senate shall refuse to allow the claim unless he is satisfied that the matter is definite and urgent. And two, if the claim is allowed by the President of the Senate and the leave of the Senate is given, by at least 1/5 of all the senators, the matter shall stand over till the next legislative day. And 3, not more than one such motion may be made at the same sitting. And Standing Order 52 says, notice shall not be dispensed with in the case of a motion or in respect of any other proceeding for which notice is required except with the consent of the President of the Senate and the general assent of the senators present. I so submit, sir.
Thank you, distinguished Shatima. Because we have come under orders 42 and 52, we need the approval of at least 1/5 of senators present for you to present your motion. So we'll sit down and put the question. Distinguished colleagues, those in favor of his request that he's granted the leave to present a motion under orders 42 and 52, say aye. Those against, say nay. The ayes have it. Senator Kashim Shettima, present your motion.
Your Excellency, distinguished colleagues, the Senate should note that Borno Central Senatorial District, and indeed Borno State and the Northeast as a whole, has been the epicenter of the Boko Haram insurgency over the years. Saddened that suspected Boko Haram terrorists invaded Auno village 2 kilometers to Maiduguri, the Borno State capital, around 10 p.m. of Sunday, 9th April 2020, and killed 30 people, burned down shops, and razed about 18 commercial vehicles, including trucks loaded with goods, and abducted many people, mostly women and children. Notes further that the victims arrived at the military checkpoint leading into Maiduguri after the 5 p.m. closure of the gate and had no choice but to sleep in Auno, the neighboring village on the Maiduguri-Damaturu highway. Disturbed that the military usually lock up the gates in the village, both the entrance and exit gates, by 5 p.m. and proceed to spend the night in Maiduguri, despite its closeness to Maiduguri. Further disturbed that there was no single military personnel to engage them, and there was also no reinforcement from Maiduguri despite the proximity of Auno to the headquarters of Operation Lapia Dole. Note that while people of Auno were still in shock over the attack, the insurgents around 6 p.m. Monday 10th February 2020 struck the village of Tungushe in Konduga local government, shooting sporadically, and casualty figures are yet to be ascertained. And just last evening, there was pandemonium in the Polo area of Maiduguri because of an attempted incursion by the Boko Haram insurgents into Maiduguri. A combined team of the crack unit of the Nigerian Police Force, the Civil Defense Force, and the civilian JTF were able to repulse the attacks. And Your Excellency, distinguished colleagues, at the risk of sounding self-serving, my boss, the Borno State Governor, Professor Zulum, was at the hospital up to the wee hours of this morning, attending to the sick and the wounded. Your Excellency, distinguished colleagues, as the Chinese may say, the worst case they may wish for you is for you to live in insurrectionist times. And indeed, just like the Chinese are fighting coronavirus, forming elite consensus, this is also time for us as a people, as a community, to coalesce into a single force and fight the scourges of insurgency, kidnapping, armed banditry, and all other social vices. I do not want to grandstand, and I wish to call on our colleagues who may likely make contributions on this issue not to grandstand. I can easily play to the gallery, gain momentary applause, pour venom on Buhari, lampoon the federal government, but will it achieve the desired result? Unless we suffer from memory amnesia. It was under this same Buhari that between 2015 and 2017, we had a momentary respite before the current relapse. Times like this, Your Excellency, distinguished colleagues, calls for sobriety, calls for maturity, calls for contriteness, for circumspection and unity. As the Economy Minister of Greece rightly said, we have to be the adults in the room. But I wish to call on the Senate to accordingly resolve to condemn in strong terms the dastardly acts perpetuated by these insurgents at Auno and in all the places in the north-east and the nation as a whole. Observe a minute silence in honor of the deceased victims of the attacks. Urge the federal government to begin a process of rehabilitating the affected communities through the windows of the Northeast Development Commission and the Ministry for Humanitarian Affairs and Special Duties. Urge the military authorities to establish a base in Auno, to intensify their efforts in the fight against insurgency in the Northeast, and finally call on the defense headquarters to set up a committee to immediately investigate what transpired in Auno and take measures to forestall future occurrences. I so submit, Your Excellency, distinguished colleagues. Thank you.
Senator Ibrahim Hassan Adeja.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues. Ibrahim Hassan Adeja, Jigawa Northeast. Mr. President, I don't want to go into a long submission before concurring and supporting this motion brought about by distinguished Senator Kashim Shettima. But just to say that luckily we have in the chamber the majority leader who is currently chairing the Senate's ad hoc committee on restructuring of our security apparatus. And just to let this chamber know that we've been sitting now for the last 2 days. And I think what we simply need to look at, Your Excellency, is we need to redirect our security agencies to focus on preventive security. We are fighting terrorism and insurgency. It's not a conventional security situation that we can ask the police to take care of. Even our army is trained for war, conventional warfare. Mr. President, these people seem to have taken the advantage of the element of surprise. These people seem to have better information than our security agencies. Because when you have a situation like you have in Auno, virtually every attack, virtually every move they make is predicated on some lapse or some gap in our security apparatus that they take advantage of. That means instead of us focusing on intelligence gathering to nip their attempts in the bud, they are the ones using intelligence to now take advantage of these gaps in our security situation and strike and go back at will. Your Excellency, like I said, I don't want to delve too much into this, and I don't want to preempt what this committee will finally bring back to the Senate for implementation, but we need to change our focus on security. We are being reactive. Every day, whether it's kidnapping, whether it's a terrorist attack, we only move and make noise when the act happens. In most countries that have this problem, they take care of 20, 30, 40 attempts without anybody hearing about it, Your Excellency, because everything is focused on prevention. Intelligence gathering, technology-driven security apparatus, they nip it in the bud. Sometimes they stop these terrorist activities at source, sometimes outside the country of origin. Why can't we focus, why can't we do what is needed, to try to stem this thing, before it completely moves beyond the traditional 2, 3, 4 northeastern states, and we are back to square one. Thank you very much, Mr. President, and on behalf of myself, I want to extend our sympathies to Senator Kashim Shettima and the good people of Borno State. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. I really don't want to comment much on this, what has happened. I only want to comment on just an aspect of the prayers, which is for us to do 1 minute silence for the victims of the Auno attack. And I was just sitting down here with Senator Aduda, and I was calculating how many minutes in a day and how many victims we have. And just to point out a very poignant fact, that if we stand here for 1 minute for every victim of those who have died in this carnage all this time, that will probably stand here for 28 or 29 days. We'll be standing just because of people who have died. And our security agencies must take note of that. I so submit.
Senator Sabi Ali Abdullah, Deputy Chief Whip.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. Aliu Sabi Abdullah, Niger North. I want to first align myself with the mover of the motion on this very unfortunate episode. The truth, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, is that we have discussed very thoroughly and indeed very robustly the issue of insecurity in this chamber. And for me, what has happened in Auno is definitely a manifestation of what we have agreed here, a failure of the current security arrangement. And I think the point I would like to highlight and to emphasize is a point I have made earlier. What is the premium on life in Nigeria? I believe as a nation, we must ask ourselves this very critical question. As people will always put it, we are very religious, but our religiosity has not stopped us from allowing things that our faith says should not happen. It is said, when you save a life, it's as if you have saved the whole of humanity. And when you kill one life, it's as if you've killed the whole of humanity. And so if you look at the number of people that we are losing across the various shades of the insecurity challenges, honestly, we have to begin to ask ourselves. In some other countries, when one life is lost, you will see the entire nation rising up because of the importance they've attached to that life. So, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I will not want to say too much on this because we are already working. And I believe this is only another spotlight to shed light on the key issues that we must address as a nation. And I would like us at all times, within the context of this assignment, to try to define what is the premium on a Nigerian life. Because we just have to know that we don't own life, we don't manufacture it, we don't create it, and we don't have it. So we must know that every single life matters, and we must do everything in our capacity to do the needful
so that this gory story that besieged our media space all the time will begin to be a thing of the past. I sympathize with those who have lost their loved ones. Almost all of us in this chamber, and indeed all Nigerians, are victims of this current unfortunate situation. And I think it calls for very deep thinking and alternative to what is happening. With this, I submit that we should look at this issue more deeply and critically. Thank you, Mr.
Senator Gabriel Susan.
Mr. President, I'm Dr. Gabriel Suswan, Benue Northeast. Mr. President, let me sympathize with Malam Shetima for what has happened within his constituency. Malam Shetima has been on the heat of this since he became governor of that state. And I'm aware, as his colleague then, of efforts that he as a person had made in the past to address the security challenge that he had faced then and he's still facing. Well, in his motion, he cautioned that we shouldn't politicize this. I agree with him. But Mr. President, when you want to hold a bull and bring it down, you have to hold the bull by the horn. But because consistently we have refused to hold the bull by the horn and call a spade, we'll continue to have this problem. If there are issues that have affected the entire of the country, because this is not limited to the Northeast or to Borno. In the past, like he said, a few years back, people had thought that it was a Northeastern problem or a Borno problem alone. Now, this problem has permeated the entire nook and crannies of this country. And like other speakers have mentioned here, in these chambers, from the inception of this 9th Assembly, what has preoccupied us most here, if we take statistics, is the issue of security that have cropped up on a daily basis. Mr. President, I think that it is high time that we approach this differently and we call a spade a spade. And I think that it is not just us. We need the buy-in of the other arms of government, because we can talk, we can articulate the issues as they are, as we see them, as we relate with our people. But if there is no strong synergy or cooperation from the other arm of government, Mr. President, it ends up on the floor here as mere lip service or mere talking. And so we, as elected representative of our people, must move beyond talking on the floor here every day. There are massive killings of our people. Some weeks back, it was Senator Sani. The other time, it was Senator ID Gang. And this has continued to come. We talk about security, security, security. You know, we cannot continue, because in the past, we've heard that Boko Haram have been disseminated. Boko Haram has been exterminated. These are all things that have come from the military, that are finished with Boko Haram. I think that beyond mere propaganda, let us address the issue as Senator Hadija have said here. Let us go to the source of it. It is not about intelligence. We don't lack intelligence. We know exactly where these people are. These people come in trucks. People who come in trucks cannot be invisible. They come in trucks and with, well armed.
The Assembly should round up, please.
President, I support the motion as moved by Malam Shetima, but we'll continue to observe 1 minute silence for the people, for Nigerian people. But then we should move beyond that. Like you have set up a committee. Let us see what that committee comes out with, and then we can sit down with the other arm of government so that we can seriously address this problem and put it behind us. I so submit, Mr. President.
The Distinguished colleagues will go to the prayers. Prayer 1. Condemn in strong terms the dastardly act perpetuated by these insurgents Those in favor of prayer 1 say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Prayer 2. Observe a minute's silence in honor of the deceased victims of the attacks. Those in favor of this prayer say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Prayer 3. Urge the federal government to begin a process of rehabilitating the affected communities through the Northeast Development Commission. Those in favor of this prayer say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Prayer 4. Urge the military authorities to establish a base in Auno to intensify their efforts in the fight against insurgency in the Northeast and instruct the defense headquarters to set up a panel to investigate what transpired at Auno and find measures to forestall future occurrence. Those in favor of prayer 4 say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Prayer 5. Urge the federal government through NEMA and Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs to send relief materials to the families of those affected by the attack. Those in favor of this prayer say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Distinguished colleagues, let me additional prayer. Abu Moro.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Senator Abba Moro, representing the good people of the Benue South Senatorial District. Mr. President, my additional prayer is to urge the military and all relevant security agencies involved in the fight against Boko Haram to re-engineer and or re-gig their approach towards fighting insurgency in the Northeast and other parts of Nigeria. I so submit, Mr. President.
Any seconder? Senator Ayo Akinye-Lure.
Thank you, Mr. President. Distinguished colleagues, my name is Senator Ayo Akinye-Lure. I represent Ondo Central. I move, Mr. President, to support the motion as moved by my colleague, Senator Pat Abamoro. I so second, Mr. President.
Those in favor of the additional prayer by Senator Abamoro say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Distinguished colleagues, thank you very much for the various contributions. And let me remind us that in times like this, it is extremely necessary and essential and imperative indeed that leaders come together, regardless of their political platforms and beliefs. As leaders, we are challenged today in this country. And it doesn't matter whether you are APC or PDP or YPP or indeed anything, or even if you don't believe in any political party. So long as you are in position of leadership at any given level, you are challenged. So we have to continue to remain focused and united to ensure that we deal with this serious challenge of security in our country. Today, we all recall that we have our committee, a 17-man committee, ad hoc committee, to work on the security architecture, headed by the Senate leader. That committee is working around the clock. In fact, the Senate leader, I think, will leave by 12 noon. They are engaging with all the relevant security agencies, and including retired military and security people, so that we are able to get the necessary information and input for us to come up with very strong resolutions. There's no way we can do this alone. We have to work with the executive arm of government and indeed other stakeholders. But on this, I want to assure all of us here that we are on the same page with the executive arm of government. Everybody is worried. And at this point, I believe that we are all agreed that the security architecture as presently constituted and designed is simply not giving the outcome that we want or we need. And therefore, going forward, we'll have to find a better structure and architecture for our security to provide the necessary service that we need for the protection of our lives and property. Why shouldn't we have an active and better equipped, for example, mobile police? The concept of mobile policing was designed at the beginning to be an outfit between the regular police and the military. The mobile police has almost vanished. The military is doing something that it's not supposed to do in many parts of the country. And the time has come for us to ensure that governance is done like it's business. You employ someone, give that person a target. He accepts on the basis of the fact that he believes he can meet the target. If he doesn't meet the target, and there is no explanation, cogent reasons why he fails, he should go. And I think when we hold people responsible, they are likely to perform better. So I believe that we are all together in this, and by the grace of God, when our ad hoc committee would have finished its work, probably 1 or 2 more weeks, we'll take our resolutions here, and we are going to engage with the executive arm of government. And let me also advise us that no amount of investment should be too much. We are talking about the lives of the people that we represent. So even if it is true supplementary budget, we should have money. The training institutions of the police, and we should ensure there is proper training for these people. And therefore, I am sure we are going to have a very fruitful engagement, and with the data, and the outcome will be something that will help us curb the current insecurity that we face. Thank you very much. Leader of the Senate.
Thank you, Mr. President, for this very...
1 minute silence, Leader. May the souls of our departed compatriots rest in perfect peace. Amen. Leader of the Senate.
Thank you, Mr. President, for this very conclusive and poignant conclusion you have reached on this very important mission that has been raised by the distinguished Senator Kasim Shettima. With that, I will introduce the first business of the day, which is the presentation of a bill standing in the name of the distinguished Senator Biodun Olujimi on Federal College of Education, Amao Ekiti, Ekiti State Establishment, etc. Bill 2020. Mr. President, you may wish to invite the Clerk of the Senate to read the short title of the bill.
The Clerk of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, Federal College of Education, Omo Ekiti, Ekiti State Establishment, etc. Bill 2020, SB 269, first reading.
Federal College of Education, Omo Ekiti, Ekiti State Establishment, etc. Bill 2020, SB 269, first reading taken. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, my highly respected and distinguished colleagues, the second business of the day is the presentation of a bill standing in the name of the distinguished Senator Elisha Cliff Ishaku on the Federal College of Education Technical Michika, Adamawa State Establishment, etc. Bill 2020. Mr. President, you may wish to invite the Clerk of the Senate to read the short title of the bill.
Clerk of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, Federal College of Education, Technical, Michika, Adamawa State, Establishment, etc. Bill 2020, SB 312, first reading.
Federal College of Education, Technical, Michika, Adamawa State Establishment, etc. Bill 2020, SB 312, first reading taken. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, my highly respected and distinguished colleagues, the third business of the day is the presentation of a bill standing in the name of distinguished Senator Bulus Kilawat Amos
on the Institute of Information and Communication Technology, Plenary, Gombe State Establishment, etc. Bill 2020. Mr. President, you may wish to invite the Clerk of the Senate to read the short title of the bill.
Clerk of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, Institute of Information and Communication Technology, Plenary, Gombe State Establishment, etc. Bill 2020, SB 313, first reading.
Institute of Information and Communication Technology, Plenary, Gombe State Establishment, etc. Bill 2020, SB 313, first reading taken. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, my highly respected and distinguished colleagues, the fourth business of the day is the presentation of a bill standing in the name of distinguished Senator Patrick Ayo Akinyelure on the prohibition of discrimination between first degrees and higher national diplomas, Bill 2020. Mr. President, we wish to invite the Clerk of the Senate to read the short title of the bill.
Clerk of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, prohibition of discrimination between first degrees and higher national diplomas, Bill 2020, SB 297, first reading.
Prohibition of discrimination between first degrees and higher national diplomas, Bill 2020, SB 297, first reading taken. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, my highly respected and distinguished colleagues, the fifth business of the day is the presentation of a bill standing in the name of distinguished Senator Alhaji Sahabi Awu on the Federal Medical Center at Auranamoda, Establishment, etc. Bill 2020. Mr. President, you may wish to invite the Clerk of the Senate to read the short title of the bill.
Clerk of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, Federal Medical Center, Auranamoda, Establishment, etc. Bill 2020, SB 314, first reading.
Federal Medical Center, Auranamoda, Establishment, etc. Bill 2020, SB 314, first reading taken. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, my highly respected and distinguished colleagues, the first order of the day is a motion standing in the name of distinguished Senator Sadiq Suleiman Umar and 10 others on the need to mainstream the National Park Service into Nigerian security architecture. Mr. President, you may wish to invite distinguished Senator Umar Sadiq Suleiman to move the motion.
Senator Sadiq Suleiman Umar.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues, I am Sadiq Sulaiman Umar. I represent the good and decent people of Kwara North. I rise to move the motion that there is need to mainstream the National Park Service into the Nigerian security architecture. With me are 10 other senators with national parks in their state. The Senate notes that there are 7 national parks in Nigeria covering 20,156 square kilometers, which is about 3% of Nigeria's total area. Also note that the national parks portray the success or failure of government environmental policies. The national parks are especially critical in mitigating environmental threats. Aware that the national parks in Nigeria serve to protect the country's diverse flora and fauna, thereby ensuring that the natural ecosystem remains intact. Concerned that these national parks are becoming safe haven for criminal elements within the society, who often use parks as hideout. They come out to attack and return back for safety. Aware that the security agencies
Routine patrols does not cover the parks, and the park rangers are only trained to guide and protect the parks. Worried that the National Park Service has not sufficient resources, personnel, and training to cope with the current security challenges the nation is facing. Also worried that what is at the disposal of the park rangers are obsolete and low-caliber firearms and ammunition, such as double-barrel shotgun, DBSG, pump action, and ding guns. I'm distressed that parks are now home to organized crime, namely banditry, kidnapping, and cattle rustling, with resultant killing of park rangers and commuters by herdsmen. The Senate accordingly therefore resolves to 1, mainstream the National Park Service into the national security architecture in line with the resolution of the 12th National Council on Environment. Give special training in firearms and ballistics, as well as surveillance and intelligence information gathering to park rangers. Conclude the tripartite consultation, that is, Ministries of Environment, Agriculture, and Interior, on the presidential intervention, and involve other security agencies in park protection and surveillance. I so move. Mr. President.
Senator Bikule Amosu.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ibikunle Amosu, I represent Ogun Central Senatorial District. First, Mr. President, let me commend the main mover of this motion. I'm a co-sponsor of this motion. Mr. President, it is very important for us, for our security agencies to be involved in taking charge and taking part of the maintenance of our national parks. We have about 7 of them, as said. Mr. President, currently we are having this our security review, the committee that this Senate set up, and I happen to be a member of this committee. We have met with the Conservator General, and he too raised these issues, that those parks now are having for all these undesirable elements. Indeed, it is such that they cannot, some of them, they can no longer have access to them because undesirable elements have taken over. Bandits, name it, they're there. And clearly, day by day, the place is being torn to where all of these evil forces, where they gathered and torment and attack our people everywhere. Wherever these parks are located, except for maybe 1 or 2, they are now the places where they gather as home to go and attack and return back to those places. And of course, the people there, the people that maintain the park, they are helpless. If our soldiers, even other security paramilitary agencies cannot cope, your guess is as good as mine what those that are in the parks. They have very obsolete, very limited guns and all of those things that they will use to defend themselves. So it will be in our interest. Before now, parks should be, yes, parks. Ordinarily, it should be where people will come, play. We keep all our very, very important maybe animals, some even people there to recreate. But these days, it's been turned to something else. So it is important now that we involve all our security agencies, that they should look into this as what they are doing to all other prone marked areas. They have some, of course, they flag some. These are red routes, red areas that they must make sure that they police, they must make sure that they secure. Our parks should be part of those areas. that they consider to be very strategic in ensuring that Nigeria is secured. It is not just about those in the maybe northeast alone, it is those everywhere. They are gradually turning them to haven for criminals. So, Mr. President, I want to urge my colleagues to support this motion. It will be in our interest to so do. It will be in our interest to help in securing our people and securing us as well. Thank you, Mr. President.
The Deputy Chief.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. I'm Aliu Sabi Abdullahi. I represent Niger North, and I come from the host community of the first national park in Nigeria, the Kanji Lake National Park. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, this motion is very timely and apt because, like the last speaker said, very obviously, if you look at 20,156 square kilometer, that is a very huge area. And as it is today, the entire National Park Service has a staff strength of just about 2,200, just about that. And that means you are having only one staff to cater for 10,000 square kilometer. That is not something that can be achieved. And if you look at the fact that they are ill-equipped, they are not properly trained for some of the challenges they are facing, then you can understand the urgency with which we must take a look at that space that God has so blessed us in this country. And of course, in talking about this 20,000, or thereabout square kilometer, we're not even including the other forest reserves, of which we have more than 30. And put together, they are also very huge spaces. So, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, in line with what obtains in other parts of the world, where they value their national parks as a national resource, national asset that holds their biodiversity, that is both flora and fauna, you agree with me that the motion is actually bringing us to take a look at what God has blessed us with. And of course, in most of the host communities, they also depend on this forest for what is termed environmental services. The issue of medicine, the issue of foods, and other little things that they do. Today, most of these communities cannot even venture out to the, what they call the buffer zone between the parks and even their own farms and the like. So the resultant effect is many of them are afraid, their communities are being attacked. And you recall, Mr. President, I once reported in this chamber the attack that took place in the Borgu sector of the Kanji Lake National Park. And of course, the one that took place just recently in the Zugurma sector of the same Kanji Lake National Park. So these challenges, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, is real. And as we look at the security architecture, I think there is no better time to mainstream these very vast resources in terms of protection of not just the park itself because of what it holds for sustainability, but the communities around them. Thank you, Mr. President, for this opportunity.
Senator Hezekiah Dimka. Senator Obasani.
Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues, my name is Obasani. I represent Kaduna Central. Mr. President, I would like to support this motion, ably moved by distinguished Senator Sadiq Umar. This is a very important motion. I come from a state where we have one of the largest national park in Nigeria, that's Kamuku National Park. And I believe the problem we're facing in our national parks in Nigeria today is the issue of insecurity. And of course, we're also aware that national parks are the major source of revenue, but because of the insecurity, we are losing revenues and source of ways of generating revenues in our own country. And again, we also are aware that there are major recreational centers the national parks. But unfortunately, because of the insecurity, our people cannot visit those national parks for recreational activities. Again, most of our people used to go to these parks for exercise to keep fit, and it affects the happiness of our people because of the lack of security. Therefore, I would like to support this motion, and I believe it's timely. And I would like to also join my colleagues in at least supporting that the national parks be considered in mainstreaming the security architecture of this country so that they can have proper security, and the personnel there must be properly trained and organized. That is the only way our parks can be safe and secured, and our people can use them appropriately. I therefore support this motion. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Patrick Abba Moro.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am Senator Abba Moro, representing the very good people of the Benue South Senatorial District of Benue State. Mr. President, I want to lend my support to this very, very important motion, with the understanding that the Senate, feeling so concerned about the security situation in the country, has recently placed an ad hoc committee to review our security architecture and other related matters. Mr. President, for purposes of emphasis, I want to say that today we do know that most of these criminal activities that take place and constitute security challenges to us emanate from some of these parks and forests across the country. And I believe very sincerely in prevention being better than cure. It is for this reason that I think that we should take urgent steps in collaboration with other arms of government to build very strong institutions across this country to fight some of the nuances that we have in our country. Mr. President, there is no doubt that today, if you are kidnapped, you are taken to the parks or you are taken to the forests. Most of these activities, like coming from Sambisa by the insurgents, are coming from our parks and forests. Therefore, Mr. President, I think that it is a very auspicious time for this motion to be considered and given necessary support for implementation, so that at least we'll be able to prevent the building of homes for insurgents and other criminal elements in our society. Mr. President, I think it is very, very important that all of us and men of goodwill in this country should support this motion and urge the executive arm of government to see to its implementation. Thank you, Mr. President, for giving me this opportunity.
Senator Lola Ashru.
Mr. President, I'm Senator Ashiru, representing the good people of Kwara South. This motion is very apt and very important, especially that we are considering the security architecture of Nigeria in general. Parks and forests are very important, integral part of our economy. In other climes, especially in the southern reach of Africa, parks are a great asset, especially when you consider the issue of tourism. If we don't protect our parks, the likelihood that we'll not be able to generate money from tourism is important. I mean, it's really there. So I think that putting security together to protect our parks and forests is an important economic index we should take. Therefore, I support this bill in totality. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Olubunmi Adetunbi will conclude with you.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Olubunmi Adetunbi, representing Ekiti North. I'd like to congratulate my friend and brother, for raising this very timely motion to draw attention to very serious structural deficit in the economy of our country that is producing tremendous social tension. It's almost boiling over, and I'm going to speak to a number of issues a little different from what we've had so far. Mr. President, it is good for the parks to be better managed from a security perspective. But of more fundamental interest to me, and I believe to a sustainable solution to this problem, is the question about what is the supply side of the criminality that we are talking about? How do we generate this pipeline of criminals and bandits that make use of these forests? How do they come about? I think that is really the need for understanding of the cause of the problem rather than the palliative of solving the presenting issue, which is insecurity and banditry across the land. Mr. President, Nigeria is in the worst state of human inequality, unprecedented. And this is now breeding a social problem because people are beginning to react to the severity of their human conditions by taking laws into their hands and trying to help themselves. So if we don't remove this anomaly, we will always have, bust and boom seasons of security and peace and respite, and then it comes back. And that is why I think our energy should be devoted more to looking at the root of the problem. There is inequality in the country, and it is becoming difficult to deny. Of course, the consequences of it is staring at all of us in the face. The issue of out-of-school children is a breeding ground for future criminals, because what we are experiencing now is the past out of school that has metamorphosed into what we have. I want us as a Senate to pay particular attention to the planning effort of the federal government that is ongoing, so that this planning effort will have the cardinal and single mission of poverty eradication and the removal of inequality, economic inequality from our midst. Mr. President and distinguished colleagues, a report came out recently on the state of social protection in Nigeria. And I want to commend every member of this Senate to look for that report and for us to see what we can do. I want to suggest that in addition to these security measures, the whole issue of poverty eradication, education, and employment is given a focal attention so that we will not have this type of experience in the future. Mr. President, I thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's go to the prayers. Prayer 1. Mainstream the National Park Service into the national security architecture in line with the resolution of the 12th National Council on the Environment, FMEMV/TH/NCE/Fed/YG123. Those in favor of this prayer say aye. Those against any, the ayes have it. Prayer 2. Give special training in firearms and ballistics, as well as surveillance and intelligence information gathering to park rangers. Those in favor of this prayer say aye. Those against any, the ayes have it. Prayer 3. Conclude the tripartite consultation, Ministries of Environment, Agriculture and Interior, on the presidential intervention. Those in favor of this prayer say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. And prayer 4. Involve other security agencies in park protection and surveillance. Those in favor of prayer 4 say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Thank you very much. additional prayer, Deputy Chief Whip.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. Ali Sabi Abdullahi, Niger North. Additional prayer to read as follows. Involve the host communities in park protection and surveillance through development intervention and livelihood support.
Seconder. This one is a princely seconder. Okay, Leader of the Senate.
I rise, Mr. President, to recant the additional prayer that has been read by distinguished Senator Sabi Abdullahi, the Deputy Whip of the Senate.
Those in favor of the additional prayer, moved by the Deputy Chief Whip and seconded by the Senate Leader, say aye. Those against, say nay. Ayes have it. Thank you very much, Disungoli, for the various interventions. Leader of the Senate. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, my highly respected and distinguished colleagues, the second order of the day is the second reading of the Police Act, Cap P19, Laws of the Federation of Nigeria 2004, Repeal and Re-enactment Bill 2020. Distinguished senators will recall that the bill was read for the first time in this chamber on Wednesday, 20th November 2019. Mr. President, we wish to invite Senator Dauda Jika to move the motion for the bill to be read the second time.
Distinguished Senator Halluru Dauda Jika, Chairman, Senate Committee on Police Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. I'm from Bauchi State. My name is Senator Halluru Dauda Jika, representing Bauchi Central Senatorial Zone. Mr. President, I rise humbly to move for the second reading of a bill for an act to repeal the Police Act, Cap P9, Laws of the Federation of Nigeria 2004, and enact the Nigerian Police Bill 2019 to provide for the framework for the police service and ensure cooperation and partnership between the police and communities in maintaining peace and combating crimes for related matters. I so move, Mr. President.
Continue with the debate.
This important bill, Mr. President, for an act to repeal the Nigerian Police Act, Cap P9, Laws of the Federation 2004, to enact the Nigerian Police Act 2019. This bill was read for the first time in this hallowed chamber on Wednesday, 20th day of November 2019. Mr. President, this bill seeks to primarily provide for the framework for the police service and ensure cooperation and partnership between the Nigerian police and communities in the maintaining peace and combating crimes and sundry acts of insecurity in Nigeria. There are current challenges and deficiencies in the structure, appointment, promotion, discipline, posting, training, kitting, weaponry, living condition, pension and retirement benefits. Indeed, the general welfare of our dear gallant officers within the Nigerian police force have persisted, largely because of the draconian and outdated statutes that guided policing in Nigeria. Mr. President and distinguished colleagues, the present act, Police Act, is not only fraught with deficiencies, but strongly the major organization duties and powers of the Nigerian police force as encapsulated in the present act have largely remained as set out in the 1943 Police Act. It is the recognition of the inherent shortcoming in the extant Police Act and the seemingly intractable challenges of insecurity in our country that has necessitated the proposed repeal for this extant act and the enactment of the new one in its place in consonance with the dictate of international best practice and realities of present-day Nigeria. Mr. President, the security of life and property of citizens and residents remain one of the primary purposes of government. everywhere. The 1999 Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, as amended in Section 14, subsection 2, paragraph B, indeed states that the security and welfare of the people shall be the primary purpose of government. Yet, the spread of insecurity and criminality in Nigeria has remained not only alarming, but unrelenting violent crimes, such as terrorism, kidnapping, armed robbery and banditry, suicide bombing, ethno-religious killing, suicide, election violence, and other forms of nefarious activities have characterized daily living in Nigeria. The negative impact of this sad security situation on the economy and general socio-political development of Nigeria as well documented. The 2019 edition of the Global Peace Index, which is described as the world leading measures of global peacefulness, placed Nigeria among the first least peaceful countries in the sub-Saharan region, including Democratic Republic of Congo as number 55, Central African Republic as number 57, Somalia 158, South Sudan 161. The Global Position Index report ranked Nigeria number 148 among 163 independent states and territories according to their level of peacefulness. Nigeria does retain this 148 spot for the second year in a row, having attained the same unenviable position in 2018. You may wish to recall, Mr. President, my dear colleagues, that there was an attempt in the 8th Assembly to repeal the Extant Act, Police Act, and to enact a new Nigerian Police Act, but regrettably, that effort could not be consumed before the expiration of the Assembly. Part 1 of the new bill captured its general specific objectives of the bill, which summarily is to provide for a more efficient and effective police service that is based on the principle of accountability and transparency, as well as the protection of human rights and fundamental freedom. The extant Nigerian Police Act has neither general nor any specific objective. In view of the concern about adherence to the human rights norms by the police, the clause making the Nigerian duty bound to promote and protect the fundamental right of persons in police custody as guaranteed by the Constitution was inserted in this bill. Another deviation from the Extant Police Act is the amendment proposed in respect to the appointment of and removal of the Inspector General of Police. This amendment was the one that became contentious, especially in the view of the 8th House of Representatives. Another amendment has to do with the tenure of office of the IGP. A 5-year was recommended for each IGP to address the challenges of the non-committal of the IGP to effect meaningful changes due to the usual short tenure of most IGPs. For instance, since 1999, there have been 10 IGPs, including the present one. This is an average of 2 years per IGP. Provision relating to the removal of the serving IGP are so crucial that they have also been inserted in this new bill. Additionally, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, in response to the lacuna in the present law on the functions of the IGP, a clause is inserted in this new bill to clearly state the limit of the powers and functions of the IGP and thus improve accountability. The new bill has equally proposed to increase the number of persons that have a say in assignment of commissioners of police to different states of the Federation, to include the state governors and the Minister of the FCT. It's stipulated in the Police Service Commission as the appointing authority. It is also provided for commissioners of police to be appointed to head departments and operational units. Mr. President and respected colleagues, the bill also provides for the establishment of community police forum and board for by the commissioners of police of each state that shall consist of representatives of the police force and the local community in the states. This clearly is a paradigm shift from the traditional police system to a community participatory system of policing, uniting ordinary citizens in their respective communities with the police in the prevention of and detection and resolving crimes. In order to address the prevailing issues of gender discrimination by the police, a clause prohibiting discrimination on the basis of gender in Nigeria Police Force and by the force has been deliberately inserted in the new bill. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, Nigeria generally applauds the National Assembly within the passage of the Police Trust Fund Bill, which recently received the assent of His Excellency President Muhammadu Buhari, President and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the Federation. The reality is that except there is a concomitant amendment to the Extant Act of the Nigeria Police Force, the new Police Trust Fund Act, as important as it is, may not achieve the level of effectiveness and outcome desired. In all, this bill deserves an urgent attention as it leverages the existing legal gaps in the Extant Nigerian Police Act, which has resulted in administrative bottleneck and the general poor policing and heightened insecurity across Nigeria. Interestingly, there is no extra cost implication with regard to the bill. I sincerely thank you for listening to me and for your anticipated support. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, distinguished.
Senator James Ebo, Manager.
Thank you, Mr. President, my highly respected colleagues. James Ebo, Manager, Delta South. Mr. President, I rise to support this very important bill. Indeed, while the sponsor was going through the lead debate, some of us were worried about some of the things that we did in the last Senate. Wanted to be saw if the bill that was sponsored by, was it Abu Ibrahim, the chairman of the committee, if truly it was assented to. So, but I thank God the sponsor of the bill referred to it. That means it wasn't assented to. Mr. President, here we are again about the police force. And when you talk about the police force, and then you tie it to the constitutional provision of Section 14(2)(b). Section 14(2)(b) is all about the police force. And that is the primary responsibility of government is the protection of lives and properties. That's what Section 14(2)(b) is talking about. And the only agency that is clearly there to do that work for us is the Nigerian police force. Whatever the military is doing is complementary. It's the police force. And therefore, when the sponsor of this debate talked about this bill deserves very urgent attention, it speaks volumes about what is before us. What is before us is a very serious matter. There is serious insecurity in the country, and therefore, that primary responsibility of government is being questioned, called to question. So, this bill is very important. Very, very important, Mr. President. And again, we are talking about state police, I'm talking of community police. So this bill, in my humble view, has captured everything about community policing. But this bill must be subjected to very serious public hearing. This bill must be very, very holistic. Because everything about what we have been talking about is all in this bill. It's about this bill. And the only area that I didn't see is the funding. Funding is key. Mr. President, my respected colleagues, the Nigerian police force is being populated by young men and women. Just like the Nigerian Army, Nigerian Navy, and Nigerian Air Force. Whatever the military can do, the police force can equally do. What is lacking in the police force is because certain things are not done. The type of training, the type of funding is lacking. That is why the police force cannot equal the Nigerian Army in terms of ability to withstand some of these criminals, and therefore they are all Nigerians. So the funding is key. And I recall, Mr. President, my respected colleagues, that in the last Senate, there was a separate bill for the funding of the police force. So, Mr. President, my respected colleagues, without funding, adequate funding, whatever this bill is out to achieve, will come to nothing. Will come to nothing. So, for the public hearing, Mr. Chairman of this committee, it is important for you to carry along with the proper funding of the Nigerian police, which is lacking in this bill. So, Mr. President, I support this bill. The bill is very comprehensive. It's even talking about gender equality, but that is also captured in the Nigerian Constitution. So we don't even need it here. We don't need it here because the ground law of the country has said that there must be no gender discrimination. And therefore, you don't need to put it in another separate bill. Whatever that is happening in the police force, curiously, Mr. President, the Nigerian police force is here to produce a female IGP. In all this, how many years of independence since 1960, we have not been able to produce a female IGP. And therefore, it is something that is worth talking about, but it is something that is internal, not about law, because already the ground norm of the country says it all, that there must be no discrimination on the basis of color or gender. Mr. President, I support this bill. This bill must be given the deserved attention by this Senate, by the entire country, because in this bill, we will be able to solve some of these insecurity problems that we have in this country. Thank you, Mr. President, for the opportunity.
Senator Sirajuddin Ajibola Bashiru. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. President and distinguished colleague. I am happy to have the opportunity to stand up and speak in favor of the bill being proposed by my distinguished colleague, Senator Jika. I will say that this bill is very apposite, coming as it were at this particular point in time. And we will see that almost every day that we have sat in this Allo chamber in the past 7 or 8 months have been about talking about security. And of course, the usual refrain will be, who will bail the cats? Fortunately, the instrumentality of bailing the cats in coming up with appropriate legislative intervention is embedded in the National Assembly. So I would say that coming up with this bill on the reform of the Nigerian Police Act is up. And this is not just being said as a general statement. There are certain salient reforms which I think are very important that have been brought forward under the bill. First and foremost is the recognition that the Nigerian police should have a different focus from what it was established to do during the colonial era, which is to preserve the colonial hegemony on the country. So therefore, provisions of Section 1, 2, and 4 of the bill clearly set out the objectives, both general and specific, and more fundamentally is the recognition of the need for the Nigerian police to promote human rights and dignity of the Nigerian people in the context of enforcement of laws to protect life and property of Nigeria. Then secondly, I think the emphasis on specific role and responsibility of the Nigerian Police Council will also create a situation whereby the Nigerian police will not just be seen as an appendage of the federal executive, but as a Nigerian police in the real sense. And tied to this is also the recognition of need to have a specific tenure and the mode of removal of the Inspector General of Police. As it were today, it's as if the Inspector General of Police and some other people on the hierarchy of the Nigerian Police, they hold the office at the pleasure of the president or the executive. But from the provision, there are clear provisions on how an IGP will emerge, which appears to even be a competitive process, open to recommendations and advice of the Nigerian Police Council. Then in terms of tenure, the IGP will no longer be removed at the pleasure or upon change of government. There are certain specific grants, for instance, issue of misconduct, non-compliance with the provision of the Constitution, and manifest, and I like the word manifest incapability to be able to carry his duties. This is a very important aspect and innovation that will ensure that the IGP is not committed to any other thing but to the upholding of the Constitution of Nigeria, its laws, and protection of life and property. Then, of course, there are now clear provisions on the functions of the IGP, which will enhance our policing. Then, particularly Section 13 that talks about delegation of power. We believe if the Inspector General of Police adequately used power to delegate appropriately, it will resolve the problem of monstrosity of a huge country with a single and unified police command. But be that as it may, it should be mentioned, possibly the promoter of the bill may look at possibility of also having specific role for the Assistant Inspector General of Police. I look at the bill, there's no provision on specific duty and responsibility for the AIG, while it provided for the Deputy General of Police. What is seen in practice today is that all the 36 commissioners of police, including that of the FCT, report directly to one man, to the IG. I think this is unwieldy, and this will not allow for proper supervision on the zonal basis, and even in terms of being able to adequately and promptly respond to whatever emergencies that may arise. Then, of course, it is also important to consider the issue of element of community policing. Whereas under the present system, you have an informal voluntary system of police-community relations. There are clear provisions in the bill that provide basically for a police community forum and board to be able to actively prescribe responsibility and role for community engagement to be able to do so. And it is hoped that the bill now providing additional statutory responsibility for the governors will also encourage them to take active part in strengthening policing in their state, and then possibly address some of the perennial challenges of whether the governors are actually performing any role as chief security officer. I would say that this is a well thought out legislation, and I fully support it. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator,
thank you very much, Mr. President, and my distinguished colleagues. The only thing I want to say about this bill is to bring to the attention of the Senate that I was actually the one who sponsored this bill in the 8th Senate. And the reason then was that there were a lot of agitations relating to state police and all the arguments left and right. And we felt that if we come out with a structure that can work for all times, it should be enough to assuage the fears of Nigerians. The British Embassy was represented in the technical session that led to the establishment framing of this bill. And they were all happy because they saw the structure as adequate enough to assuage the fears of all well-meaning Nigerians and to clearly clip the agitations for state police. The only issue that arose had to do, in fact, the police itself, that's why they are still insisting the police chairman must bring it back. They wanted it desperately. There was public hearing, an elaborate one. The only issue was there was some form of misinformation that relates to the appointment of the Inspector General of Police, and then how do I put it? His tenure, and then the way he can be removed. Those were the only issues. And there were clearly no issues, because when that provision was framed, I specifically, and I'm happy Basiru has raised the use of that word, manifest. It was deliberate. The idea was, if you are doing a law, don't take advantage of the fact that you have a sitting president that is good. You must equally anticipate a situation where, in the event that you have one bad one, God forbid, that you have enough institutional safeguard to bring him in line with the wishes and aspirations of Nigerians. That was the only reason. And unfortunately, nobody can explain how that has not been. But I'm telling you that the police itself needs it, and I'm absolutely sure that with this structure put into use and the funding that we already have invested, that if the police fund, what do you call it, bill, were to pass concurrently, it will have served as a support to establish this structure. And happily enough, that was accepted. But unfortunately, this was jettisoned for reasons that are not too clear. I'm happy that my brother and friend Jika, I'm sure under pressure from the police, has decided to introduce this bill. This bill must work. And if it works, I am absolutely sure, Mr. President, this country will benefit from the operation of this structure. We have just finished a motion that talks about involvement of security in the management of our parks. It is unusual, sir, that we say we have ungoverned spaces. That expression sounds rhapsodic. Rhapsodic in the sense that our constitution has clearly delineated, defined jurisdictionally the function of every tier of government. Federal government knows what it belongs to it in this country. State government knows what belongs to it in terms of, and so it is with the local government. And the whole idea behind the framework of our constitution is that in taking government nearer to the people, there are certain responsibilities that the federal government is incapable of performing well. And therefore they were devolved to this tier of government in such a manner that the entire country will be secured. Unfortunately, people will come, take office, swear to uphold, protect and defend the constitution, but on assumption of office will sit on the same constitution. And therefore it makes the working almost unworkable. So I think that this Senate should assist this country by fast-tracking the passing of this bill, and then ensuring that it is signed into law, and then ensuring a connect between the funding and then the servicing of this structure as envisioned by this law, so that Nigerians can benefit from a better security. Once again, I urge my colleagues to support this bill. It's a very, very important bill, and I thank my brother and friend for sponsoring the bill before the Senate. Thank you.
Senator Sadiq Umar.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues, I am Sadiq Sulaiman Umar. I represent the good and decent people of Kwara North. Mr. President, I rise to support this bill, and my interest areas are just two. The first area is that the act we are using today, the major organizational and duties and powers of Nigerian police force, is the same thing that is in place since when my father was 5 years old. And at that time, I was told that in Nigeria, you can actually leave your house open. Anybody can come here and sleep, I was told. Children can enter any house and go and eat food and even sleep there till the next day they look for them. And here we are today, that your neighbors are indeed, family members can actually collaborate in your kidnap and robbery. It is high time this gets changed immediately. And I think it's apt, and I support this bill. And most importantly, in the last part of this bill, the chairman for Police, in his words, said, interestingly, there is no extra cost implication with regard to the bill. No cost implication, Chairman Police. I don't think we have anything to debate. I think we should pass the bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator doing.
Mr. President, I rise to support this bill. In supporting this bill, Mr. President, I want to add that this bill is an effort towards addressing the challenges that is facing our nation today. Effective policing, Mr. President, must be community-based, and it must be a police system that appreciates the rights of the people. What we have as present, Mr. President, was what was put in place by the colonial masters and of course inherited by the military government. In those days, Mr. President, some years back, I think it's gradually changing. Police can arrest anybody for wandering. If you move from your house to your neighbor, you could be arrested. In the north, they will tell you, kana yawo banza, you're only in Rano. And once you are arrested, you are locked up. These laws are still existing, Mr. President. So, attempt to change these laws, I think, is good for our nation. But I must say, Mr. President, perhaps when we proceed to the public hearing of this bill, we'll be able to get the details of some of the challenges that probably this bill has not really addressed. For instance, Mr. President, for a policeman to be effective, it will be better to post him within the area where he appreciates the norms and values of the people. And I could see that effort was being made in the first 2-3 paragraphs of this bill to emphasize the need to involve the state government and other stakeholders as to those who will administer security at that level. So, Mr. President, this bill equally is going to address the challenges of community policing that we are talking about. I'm not saying community policing is bad, but if we can get this right, I'm very sure that those who are agitating for even the state police may not want to do that. Because, Mr. President, the IG came here and gave us a brief. If you have people who work for the police and you are asking them to work for charity, I'm sure nobody in this country will want to do that again for so many reasons. So I think effort must be made to ensure that this bill is passed, and in the course of the public hearing, we'll be able to see some of the challenges. My colleague talked about the well-being of the Nigerian police. Of course, Mr. President, for police to be able to perform effectively, their well-being must be catered for. I recall in the 7th and 6th Senate, we discussed issues relating to the well-being of the Nigerian police. A system whereby a policeman is dropped at the checkpoint, nobody cares as to how he gets home, and you accuse the policeman of collecting bribe. How is he going to get home? There are so many things confronting the police. The well-being of the Nigerian police itself is a major problem. It's a major problem confronting the effectiveness of the Nigerian police. So we must look at this bill at the public hearing and see if we can inculcate into it those areas that nobody has really talked about. The take-home of the Nigerian police is equally very important.
You can round up.
I was not too comfortable as at the kind of equipment that was provided for the Nigerian police. And I think we can still go back to it so that the army can face the task of maintaining the territorial integrity and safety of Nigerian people. The Nigerian police should be equipped in such a manner that they can carry out those functions that today is being carried out by the Nigerian army. I so submit, Mr. President.
Senator Ibrahim Gobir.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Mr. Bush colleagues, my name is Brian Gobir, representing Sokoto East. I rise to support this bill because of its importance. The bill is very comprehensive, and I'm definitely sure if we do justice to this bill, if we are able to pass it and come up with an act, certainly there is not going to be any problem, because the main function of police is actually to look at the internal security of any country. And everywhere you go in this world, you will see that police is actually responsible for the peace and the internal security of that country. And therefore, it is our own responsibility to make sure that this bill actually passes through the second gate. And I therefore support this bill. I pray that everybody should rally around this bill to give it speedy passage. I support the bill, Your Excellency.
Senator Barrow.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am Senator Barrow Jibrin, Kano North. Mr. President, I stand to throw my weight behind this bill. I support it in its entirety because it's very, very important. Not only important, but necessary. Necessary in the sense that we need to modernize the legislation guiding the function of the Nigerian police force so as to get it rejigged to be able to perform its functions properly. Of recent, there have been proponents of village police force or local government police and sometimes state police. And I always say that this is not what is important. The important thing is to put Nigerian police force in the best form so as it will be able to perform its function. But because the way it is now is lacking in several things. Legislation, lack of funding, in fact, lack of everything. I believe that once we modernize the law and we move forward to properly address the problems facing the Nigerian police force, then we'll be able to have a situation where the policing system in this country will be very much okay. Because worldwide, the business of policing the society does not rest on the shoulders of the police force in that area. It's something that involves everybody. And that is what this amendment is part of what this amendment is trying to address, community policing. The IGP was here, he explained the concept, and it has been tried. We are trying it in Kano, it's working in Kano. Over the years we've been doing that. That's why the crime rate in Kano is very, very low. We do not have bandits in Kano. Even the kidnappers, when they commit their atrocities in other areas and run to Kano, we get apprehended. Why? Because we have this system where everybody is involved in the policing of the state. We are able to garner intelligence. When somebody comes into our society, we know that a new person, a stranger has come in, and then we try to interrogate that person. What are you here for? So, sir, it's very, very important. What is before us, and what we need to do, is to strengthen the Nigerian police. Let's all be involved. And even, high-worth individuals in our society can come into this arrangement. Give money to the police, give equipment to the police. Exactly what we have done in Kano. Governor was able to buy 500 million worth of tracking system to help the police force. So anybody, if a criminal, if a kidnapper did anything outside Kano, run to Kano, we have tracking system to get that person and get him arrested. Even the uncle of the magazine in Daura that was kidnapped in Daura, and when they ran to Kano, we got them arrested through that tracking system. So there are several. Even the other guy in Taraba, who was a kidnapping kidpin, was also arrested in Kano. He ran to Kano and thought he was safe. But we got him arrested through this tracking system. So it's something that is all encompassing. Everybody should be part of it. And this is part of what this bill is seeking to do. So I support it, and I urge all my colleagues to support this bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Bukula Musa.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ibikunle Amufa, I represent Ogun Central. Let me join my colleagues in commending Senator Ali Rujika for bringing up this bill. Mr. President, I'll be very brief. I feel very inclined to support this bill for some reasons. Of course, this bill talks about the general welfare of the men and officers of the Nigerian police force. There's nothing that can be achieved. First, we all agree in an atmosphere of insecurity. We just discussed that this morning. And if we are going to get the best from all these men and officers of not just the police, all these our security agencies, of course, they must be comfortable. Their welfare must be well taken care of. Once this is done, then we'll be in a position to challenge them if they are not working well or if they are found lacking in any of their responsibilities. Mr. President, again, this bill talks about which is good music in my ears, and I'm sure in the ears of several of our colleagues here, and that is involvement of state governors in the appointment of Commissioner for Police. I think this will all go well for complementary role between the government and federal and those in the respective states. Truth is, Mr. President, there is no state. Indeed, if you see, ask any police command in Nigeria, all the state police command, you will see that most of their operation are being supported, are being shouldered by the respective states in which they serve. So it will be what I call the right thing to do if the governors are involved in the appointment of the Commissioner for Police. I think we should look into the relationship between the IGP and the Police Service Commission. As we speak today, I think we are in court. I don't know, maybe this bill will address some, and maybe we can look at the bill setting up Police Service Commission as well. When we get to public hearing, all of these gray areas will be looked into. One, again, that thrills me is this bill talking about community policing. Of course, there are some gaps and there are some gray areas that we need to fine-tune. And I'm sure when it gets to public hearing, we'll get divergent opinions and views, and I'm sure that we will come up with something that will be acceptable to all Nigerians. Another thing that is talked about is police trust fund. They need money to do this. Without the necessary funding, of course, they will not do well. I'm aware that this has even been the last time I was in the Senate in 2003 to 2007. We talked about this police trust fund, and I think we asked was it the IG that we asked, and up to today, of course, it's not been effected. So I know that this bill talked about looking into this and making sure that we do carry out the necessary amendments such that this police trust fund will commence and it will be to the benefit of all of us, because once we are secured, Nigeria will develop. As always said, nothing good can happen in an atmosphere of insecurity. We talked about that almost on a daily basis. You open our papers. In fact, we are in the wrong, in the pages of front pages of newspaper for wrong reasons. Check papers today, probably will check tomorrow, check yesterday. Every day we talk about insecurity. So nothing would be too much for us to do to ensure that our country is secured, our country is safe, and our people is safe. So, Mr. President, I join my colleagues in supporting this bill, and I pray that this bill will quickly be passed so that it can go for public hearing and consequently to come back here for passage. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Francis Adenigba, Fadamsi.
Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues, my name is Francis Adenigba Fadamsi from Osun East. My distinguished colleague, Senator Dika Aliu, has tried to review what was done last in 2004 and to bring it to the modern day police, not Nigerian police force. They have been using force right from the military, and it still continued up till now. What he has done is to bring the police to manage crisis during democracy, not during war. And a lot has been done in the bill, particularly police and the people. And details again must be inputted inside the bill. The police, the people. The police today is seen as the master of the people. But this bill now makes police as the protector and a friend to the people that really pay their salaries and allowances. The bill has made a fundamental change, particularly for police to respect fundamental human rights during democracy. That's a very good achievement. Then the IGP, his powers and other things, they are still militarily operated, not civil IGP. The way is appointed, the way is removed, is a single person that is doing it, only to come to Senate for confirmation. Police security, the security meeting by the former head of state and former IG to screen what had been nominated by Mr. President. Tomorrow, if Mr. President just wake up, he can sack. But this new system, there are checks and balances on, one, the powers of IG, then on the power of Mr. President to appoint. Then it has gone further. The police council and the police service commission, there are always frictions between the two. And it has a bit gone into details of police council's power. That's police management. Maybe a little had to be done on the powers of police service commission. Vis-a-vis the recruitment, the promotion. The other time, the other IG was promoting those people in law. In fact, we had more than 2 or 3 promotions in a year, which was reverted by the Police Service Commission, particularly the senior ones. The recruitment, the junior ones, the management does that. Then the function of the police, the community policing, there are areas which we still include, particularly education. Like yesterday when the IGP met the Southeast, he really did a lot of education, and they agreed with him. And this is on the basis of what Senator Chika has written here. Education, not by force. Community policing is our own. We have been policing our communities. What we need to do is to include it in the federal level so that it will give it a constitutional backing. Then all others are issues of arms and ammunition. Now we have already included the governors in policing the state. Then the procurement of arms and ammunition can still be given to the governors so that it will not go into wrong hands, so that they can do the community policing very well. With these few comments, I think my friend or my junior brother has done a good job, and I support the bill. Thank you.
Senator Shakwabo.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, my name is Senator Shiako Abo, representing Adamawa North. This bill is coming at a very right time. I remember last week, the Senate deliberated extensively about overhauling the security architecture of this country. And in the wisdom of the President of the Senate, he went ahead to inaugurate a committee to look into this. Mr. President, we all know that the Nigerian police is the lead agency in maintaining internal security. Any other agency will only be supporting the police, but police take the front lead. I listened to Senator Jika last week on Channels Television. It was a very nice analogy. South Africa has 50 million people. So yet they have 1.9 million policemen policing 50 million people. Nigeria, over 200 million people, 300,000 policemen, and you want security. How will you get it? If you look at the funding of the police, it's nothing to write home about. Few days ago, we brought the IGP here, and he told us here that they are doing operation somewhere. The next day, it was on the front page of newspapers. They attacked terrorists in Kaduna, and it was successful. And the helicopter was shot at by with an AA rifle. Today, the Nigerian police are still bearing AK-47 rifle, and Boko Haram are using GPMG, gold-mounted GPMG. Mr. President, I am supporting this bill holistically. We should consider also, sir, establishing a police college in each, or police training school in each police command, so that we can recruit as many men as possible into the Nigerian police. If they need special training, they should take them to those premier police colleges. But we need enough manpower now in this country. When the time comes, I had my own bill on this issue, but at least I will allow my own to be swallowed into its own bill. I am taking my own bill so that we can conquer. For conquerors, internal conquerors now, not the other side. I am supporting this bill so that we can have an active police to police this country. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Last but not the least, Senator Rochas Okorocha.
Well, Mr. President, the solution to Nigerian security challenges could be made very simple if only we all care to address it properly. Now, the partnership and relationship between police and community in combating crime, Mr. President, is the best way to go. Believe me. And all this effort we'll be making all these years in trying to solve Nigerian security problem without making any headway is because we have not applied the right formula to do so. Now, in my own time as a governor, I developed a quote when I had challenges of kidnapping on a daily basis, and my pictures were put on faces of newspaper as if there was a kidnapper. But the simple truth is, I said, listen, gentlemen, every society of mankind is created by God with their culture and tradition. Governance is only a guide, for no society can grow above or beyond their culture and tradition, for those who have a relationship with God and creation. When we apply this colonialistic approach to handling our internal security problem, then we fail it because the culture differs. A community is defined as that group of people who share common interests, common culture, common tradition, affinity, and they are bonded by what they believe in, and that has always helped them. So if you want to understand Nigeria, Mr. President, if you want to understand Nigeria, you will know that we are strong at community level. we are stronger at community level than we are stronger at local government level. In fact, we are better off at local government level than we are at state level. We are very weak as a nation because by our culture and tradition, we say my own is my own, our own is our own. So there couldn't have been a better way to address these security challenges than what JICA has proposed, this partnership. And to do so, we must engage the traditional rulers. You know this, the amount of money we have spent in fighting crime in Nigeria, if you spend 1/4 of it and give to communities, this whole thing will stop. But when it's over-centralized and it's all over the place, then commercialization of security became an issue and becomes a business. And that's what we're solving. So in actual sense, we're the one fighting ourselves. We're the one creating security for ourselves because we have not been able to decentralize it to that unit where we feel bonded and bonded. I don't see who will come to my community today and say you're an armed robber, a criminal that will not know when you have entered. And if the community is good, then the state will be okay. If the state is okay, the nation will be okay. So, Mr. President, what JICA have said, I think we should elaborate this some more and try it. But the problem we have is that those holding the power at the national level do not want to divulge any part of their power to the smaller unit where it will be more effective. And so command and control is overstretched in fighting crimes. So, Mr. President, my submission would be, please, let's give this community policing in partnership, or this partnership between police and community as a trial and see whether we cannot fight this crime ourselves. Because those young men who are fighting our youths are not stronger than the youth that are there. So I think this is a way to go. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, distinguished colleagues. Distinguished colleagues, thank you for the various interventions. Let me say that we are in a very unusual time. When Nigeria was at war at one stage, there was very rigorous recruitment of soldiers because the situation demanded that. I think we are in a similar situation. And it is only fair for us as leaders of this country to take this challenge. This bill should consider the restructuring of the command and structure of the Nigeria police. The present structure is not working. Funding the trust fund, the police trust fund is already accruing some money. The last count I was told there was about 52 billion naira or so. But it's not about throwing money to the police. You need to adjust the structure. Otherwise, that money will just be a sinking fund. So we should be in a hurry to recruit, to train and retrain. Equipping the police training institutions is supposed to be one vital aspect of getting our security arrangements right. And this is something that we have to do in a hurry, even if it means going for supplementary budget. So be it. The kind of situation we are, the lives that are lost on a daily basis is something that we cannot tolerate, and in fact, we should be on the right side of history. With this, let me put the question. Those in favor that this bill be now read a second time, say aye. Those against, say nay. The ayes have it. Clerk of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, the bill for an act to repeal the Police Act, Cap P19, Laws of the Federation of Nigeria, 2004, and enact the Nigerian Police Bill 2020 to provide for the framework for the police service and ensure cooperation and partnership between the police and communities in maintaining peace and combating crime, and for related matters 2020, second reading.
A bill for an act to repeal the Police Act Cap P19 Laws of the Federation of Nigeria 2004 and enact the Nigeria Police Bill 2020 to provide for the framework for the police service and ensure cooperation and partnership between the police and the communities in maintaining peace and combating crime, and for related matters 2020 second reading taken. The bill is referred to the Senate Committee on Police Affairs to report back within 4 weeks. Thank you very much. Leader of the Senate. Well done.
Mr. President, my highly respected and distinguished colleagues, I would like to come under order no, we want to suspend all other matters on the order paper, to another legislative day. I want to move. Otherwise, because we have a lot of committee meetings, so I...
Leader.
Mr. President, I rise to suggest or to move a motion for the suspension or stepping down of all other items on the agenda paper to another legislative day. I so move.
Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Reluctantly, I second the motion.
No, if you don't wish to second it, we can look for someone to.
Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues, in Baribe, Abia South, I second the motion ably moved by the leader.
Distinguished colleagues, those in support of the motion that we stand down to consideration of the remaining items on the order paper till another legislative day say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, having come to the conclusion of all the items that we have on the agenda of today's proceedings, I move that the Senate adjourns to Tuesday, 18th February 2020 at 10 a.m. prompt. I so move, Mr. President.
Minority Leader. You second it so that it's properly recorded.
Thank you, Mr. President. I so second.
Thank you very much, Minority Leader. Distinguished colleagues, those in favor that the Senate do adjourn till Tuesday, 18th day of February 2020 at 10 a.m. from say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. The Senate is hereby adjourned till Tuesday, 18th day of February 2020 at 10 a.m. prompt. Thank you.